I'm a dominant alpha, and I'm 7 weeks pregnant with triplets. Even saying those words in my head felt ridiculous. If someone had told me a month ago that this would be my reality, I would have laughed until I couldn't breathe. Now, breathing itself had become difficult. The morning sickness was relentless. Every scent around me felt unbearably strong. The perfume lingering in the office hallways, the smell of fresh coffee, even someone's shampoo was enough to make my stomach churn. Most days, I barely managed to keep myself from throwing up. I looked just as strong as ever on the outside. Inside, I was completely exhausted. And the person responsible for all of this wasn't a stranger. It was my boss, Dominic Blackwood, the feared CEO of Blackwood Tech. A few weeks earlier, Dominic had unexpectedly gone into a rut after skipping his medication. As his most trusted bodyguard, I was responsible for keeping everyone safe, including him. I tried everything to find someone willing to stay with him. No one agreed. Dominic Blackwood's rut was infamous. Anyone who had ever spent the night with him had ended up hospitalized for days because of his overwhelming pheromones. People were terrified. I couldn't leave him alone in that condition. So, I made a decision that changed my life forever. The next morning, I walked out of his room completely drained. My body ached, but I recovered faster than anyone expected. I was a dominant alpha. Naturally stronger. Pregnancy never crossed my mind. Why would it? Only an enigma could make another alpha conceive. And as far as I knew, Dominic was simply another alpha. I buried that night and made sure no one would ever learn the truth. When Dominic questioned me afterward, I lied. I told him someone else had been with him. Someone whose face I hadn't seen. He never believed me. Instead, he ordered me to find that mysterious person. So I did the exact opposite. I erased security footage. Destroyed every report. Removed every trace that could possibly lead back to me. As far as anyone knew, the mystery person no longer existed. Or so I thought. One afternoon, I entered Dominic's office to deliver a file. Before I could knock, I heard voices inside. Mr. Hayes, the company's general manager, sighed in frustration. Why are you so obsessed with someone you spent one night with? You're Dominic Blackwood. If you want someone, they'll line up for you. Just forget about her. Dominic immediately corrected him. It wasn't a woman. There was a brief silence. It was a man. I froze outside the door. His voice softened. I remember him. He wasn't afraid of me. He didn't look at me like I was some monster. Everyone else only screamed or cried. But he stayed. He made me feel human. Something tightened painfully in my chest. Dominic leaned back in his chair. And I can't shake this feeling. I think he might be pregnant. I nearly dropped the file in my hands. At that exact moment, Dominic looked toward the door. Elias. I quickly stepped inside, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. The security reports, sir. He nodded before asking the same question he had asked countless times. Any progress? I forced myself to meet his eyes. I'm still trying, sir. It was the biggest lie I'd ever told. Mr. Hayes crossed his arms. And if you do find him? What if he really is carrying your child? Dominic didn't hesitate. I'll claim what's mine. My child. His expression remained unreadable. If he wants to stay with me, he can. If he doesn't, I won't force him. But my pup? I'll never abandon my pup. As I walked out of the office, I silently thanked the moon goddess. Thank goodness I wasn't an Omega. Thank goodness alpha males couldn't get pregnant. At least, that's what I believed. Everything changed weeks ago. The nausea became impossible to ignore. Food I loved suddenly made me sick. I was constantly exhausted. Then, during a morning training session, I collapsed. The company doctor insisted on running several tests. Hours later, he returned holding a report with an expression I couldn't understand. There must be some mistake, I said before he even spoke. He looked at me with uncertainty. I checked it 3 times. He slowly placed the report in front of me. You're 6 weeks pregnant. With triplets. The words echoed in my ears. No. That's impossible. I'm an alpha. Alpha males can't get pregnant. The doctor hesitated before answering. They can't. Unless the father is an enigma. My entire body went cold. An enigma. The alpha above all alphas. A being so rare that most people believed they only existed in legends. The only type capable of making another alpha conceive. My trembling fingers tightened around the report. Every strange feeling. Every question. Every lie. Suddenly made sense. Dominic Blackwood was never just an alpha. He was an enigma. And I was carrying his triplets. In that moment, my carefully built secret shattered before my eyes. Then a week later, before I could even process the doctor's words completely, my phone vibrated. The screen flashed a name that made my blood run cold. Dominic Blackwood. I answered almost immediately. Elias. His deep, emotionless voice came through the speaker. I want you in my office. Now. The call ended. No explanation. No room for questions. I remained frozen in place, staring at the black screen of my phone. My mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. Did he know? Had someone leaked my medical report? Did the doctor tell him? Or had he finally figured out that I was the man who stayed with him during his rut? My heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. What if he killed me for lying to him? No. Dominic wasn't someone who acted on impulse. That almost scared me more. What if he waited until the babies were born and took them away from me? Without thinking, my hand slowly rested on my stomach. It was still flat. There wasn't even the slightest bump yet. I was only 7 weeks pregnant. These 3 little troublemakers had already turned my life upside down. Every morning started with nausea. Every smell made me sick. I could barely keep any food down. They were exhausting. But somehow, I already loved them more than my own life. The thought of losing them was enough to make my stomach twist violently. Another wave of nausea hit me. I covered my mouth, swallowing hard. For one reckless second, I considered running away. Leaving Blackwood Tech. Leaving the city. Disappearing before Dominic ever discovered the truth. But reality quickly caught up with me. I had seen Dominic Blackwood become a real demon. I knew exactly how terrifying he could be when someone betrayed his trust. Running would only make things worse. I took a slow breath and forced myself to stand. Whatever happened, I would face it. And if I had to fight, I'd fight for my babies. Even if the person standing against me was Dominic Blackwood himself. I knocked once before entering his office. Dominic was sitting comfortably behind his desk. A cup of freshly brewed coffee rested beside him, and in his other hand was a warm, flaky croissant. His favorite breakfast. The sight alone made my stomach churn. I had spent the entire morning trying not to throw up because of these babies. And the rich buttery smell drifting across the room nearly pushed me over the edge. He looked up from his breakfast. Elias. I stepped forward. Good morning, sir. He studied me for a moment before breaking the croissant in half. Want one? He casually held a piece toward me. The smell reached me instantly. My stomach lurched so violently that I thought I was actually going to vomit right there on his expensive office floor. I quickly looked away. No, thank you, sir. He narrowed his eyes slightly before placing it back onto his plate. Are you thinking about something? And no, sir. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. That's exactly the problem. I frowned. What do you mean, sir? You aren't thinking clearly. His gaze remained fixed on mine. You know what I'm talking about. I want the person who stayed with me that night. I want to know whether he's pregnant. The words hit me like a punch. This shameless bastard. Here he was, peacefully drinking coffee and eating breakfast after completely turning my life upside down. Meanwhile, I couldn't even smell food without wanting to throw up. And he still wouldn't let this go. For a brief moment, I imagined walking over and smashing that stupidly calm expression right off his face. Then another ridiculous thought crossed my mind. Maybe I should hand Dominic over to the Blackthorne family. His greatest rivals would probably love that. Unfortunately, that was nothing more than wishful thinking. I wasn't strong enough to make something like that happen. Lost in my own thoughts, I barely noticed the pen slipping from Dominic's hand. It landed on the floor with a soft click. My instincts took over. I immediately tried to bend down to pick it up. Before I could even do that, Dominic's voice stopped me. Leave it. I looked up. I can pick up my own pen. Without another word, he leaned down himself, retrieved it, and placed it back on the desk. Then he looked at me again. You don't need to concern yourself with small things. Focus on the task I assigned you. I straightened silently. There was one question that had been haunting me since I overheard his conversation with Mr. Hayes. Sir, if I do find him, what are you planning to do? For several seconds, Dominic didn't answer. He simply signed another document before finally speaking. I believe. That's none of your business, Elias. His tone was calm. Cold. Final. I lowered my eyes. Understood, sir. A few moments later, he closed the file in front of him. That'll be all. You may leave. Yes, sir. I turned and walked out without another word. The second the office door closed behind me, I finally released the breath I'd been holding. It felt as though I had been underwater the entire time. For the first time since receiving his call, I could finally breathe again. But something told me that feeling wouldn't last much longer. That night? No matter how hard I tried, sleep refused to come. I lay on my bed, staring blankly at the ceiling while my mind replayed every mistake that had led me here. 7 weeks pregnant. With Dominic Blackwood's triplets. If only I hadn't walked into his room that night. Maybe none of this would have happened. I kept repeating the same excuse to myself. You had no choice. No one else was willing to stay with him. You were only doing your duty as his bodyguard. I wanted to believe those words. I really did. But the longer I stared into the darkness, the harder it became to lie to myself. Because the truth was that I did have another choice. I could have walked away. I could have called another security team. I could have locked the room and waited for his rut to pass. There were other options. Maybe none of them were perfect. But they existed. So why had I walked through that door? The answer was painfully simple. Because I wanted to. Not because I had to. I wanted to know what it felt like to be close to him. To be the one beside him. My feelings for Dominic hadn't begun that night. They had started 3 years ago. I was only 19 when I first met him. Fresh out of training. Still more like an overgrown teenager than the bodyguard I pretended to be. Dominic was 25. Already the legendary CEO of Blackwood Tech. The man everyone feared. I still remembered that first day as if it had happened yesterday. The elevator doors opened. He stepped out wearing a black suit that looked like it had been tailored just for him. His posture was straight, his expression cold, and every step carried the kind of confidence that made the entire lobby fall silent. Everyone lowered their heads as he walked past. Except me. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring like an idiot. He was unbelievably handsome. The kind of man who made people look twice without even trying. Back then, I was an alpha who had only ever dated girls. I had never once questioned myself. Yet after seeing Dominic, I caught myself searching for excuses just to stay near him. I volunteered for extra shifts. Accepted assignments that kept me close to him. Even a single, good work, Elias, from him was enough to make my entire day. Of course. He never noticed. To him, I was simply another bodyguard. Nothing more. So when his rut came, and no one dared to enter his room, a selfish part of me whispered that this might be the only chance I'd ever have to be close to him. I convinced myself it meant nothing. Dominic had gone through countless ruts before. Men. Women. It didn't matter. He never remembered any of them afterward. He never asked who they were. Never searched for them. I thought I would be forgotten too. By morning, everything would return to normal. I would continue protecting him from a distance, while carrying that memory with me for the rest of my life. Instead, Dominic refused to let it go. He searched for me. He kept asking questions. And now, I was carrying his children. A tear slipped silently down my cheek. Then another. Within minutes, I couldn't stop crying. I hated crying. My father had made sure of that. Ever since I was a child, he repeated the same words whenever I got hurt. An alpha doesn't cry. An alpha makes others cry. Those words became the rule I lived by. Even after joining Dominic's security team, I never allowed myself to show weakness. Broken bones. Knife wounds. Gunshots. None of them had ever made me cry. But tonight, 3 tiny lives growing inside me shattered every wall I had built. I gently placed my hand over my stomach. I'm sorry. The whisper escaped before I realized it. I don't know if I'll be able to stay with you. A fresh wave of tears blurred my vision. I knew Dominic. For all his flaws, he would never abandon his own children. But me? I didn't believe I had a future beside him. If he discovered the truth, I could already see how it would end. Either I willingly handed my babies over to their father, or I died protecting them. No matter which path I imagined, I was separated from them. Maybe that had been my fate from the moment I stepped into Dominic's room. The thought hurt more than anything I had ever experienced. But after crying until there were no tears left, I finally accepted it. If destiny intended to separate me from my babies, then I wouldn't waste the little time I had with them. For however many months they remained safely inside me, I would love them with everything I had. I would talk to them, protect them, treasure every single moment. And when the day finally came, I would place them in Dominic Blackwood's arms. Then I would quietly accept whatever decision he made about my future. Because if I had to choose between my own happiness or theirs, I would choose them. Every single time. After making that decision, something inside me finally settled. For days, I had been drowning in fear, constantly thinking about the future and everything I was going to lose. But once I accepted that my babies and I were never meant to stay together, life became lighter. Not happier. Just easier. Instead of worrying about tomorrow, I started living one day at a time. These babies were still mine. They were growing beneath my heart. No one could take that away from me. So I decided to cherish every second I had with them. Sometimes, I even wondered if the moon goddess had heard my silent prayers. Because not long afterward, Blackwood Group announced a complete restructuring of its security department. An entirely new security team was hired to handle the company's day-to-day protection. The elite unit I belonged to was relieved of most of our responsibilities. We were no longer running around the building or handling every security issue. Instead, we became a reserve team, only called in for high-risk situations or to personally protect the executives. As Dominic Blackwood's head bodyguard, my daily routine became incredibly simple. Every morning, I reported to the CEO's floor, stayed outside his office, accompanied him to meetings when necessary, and made sure nothing, or no one, caused him trouble. The irony wasn't lost on me. Most days, I wanted to be the trouble. Every time I looked at Dominic, I remembered his words. "I'll claim what's mine. All I want is my pup." I would silently glare at him from across the hallway. "Just wait. In a few months, you're going to steal my babies." The thought alone made me want to wipe that calm expression off his face. Somehow, I always managed to keep those thoughts inside. To Dominic, I remained the same dependable Elias he had trusted for years. By the time I entered my 3rd month of pregnancy, my body slowly began adjusting. The morning sickness didn't disappear, but it became much easier to manage. I could finally walk through the office without running to the nearest bathroom every hour. Then another problem appeared. I was always hungry. No matter how much I ate, it never felt enough. Fortunately, the company had recently hired a new executive chef. Whoever convinced that man to work for Blackwood Group deserved a promotion. Every meal was different. Fresh pastries in the morning. Homemade pasta for lunch. Perfectly grilled meat. Soups. Seafood. Desserts. Even healthy meals somehow tasted incredible. I found myself eating far more than I ever had before. At first, I blamed myself. Then I remembered. There were 3 tiny mouths depending on me now. Maybe they were the hungry ones. One afternoon, I was sitting alone in the executive dining room with what could only be described as an embarrassingly large plate of food. I had just taken another bite when a familiar voice spoke beside me. "Elias." I looked up. Dominic had taken the seat across from me. His eyes slowly moved from my face to the overflowing plate in front of me. One eyebrow lifted. "How many people are you eating for?" My heart skipped a beat. I quickly forced a laugh. "I've been hungrier than usual lately, sir." He didn't seem suspicious. Instead, he reached for his own lunch. "Good. You should eat well." For a brief moment, I almost smiled. Then, without even looking up from his meal, he added, "But don't forget the task I gave you. I still want you to find the man who stayed with me that night." The food in my mouth suddenly tasted like sand. I almost dropped my fork. Seriously? This unbelievable man. For almost 2 months, I had barely been able to eat because of the triplets growing inside me. Now that I could finally enjoy food again, he somehow managed to ruin my appetite with a single sentence. I forced myself to nod. "I understand, sir." Inside, however, I was mentally throwing my plate at his head. The weeks passed quickly. Much quicker than I wanted them to. Before long, I was about to enter my 4th month. That was when hiding my pregnancy became a real challenge. Triplets didn't wait politely. My stomach had already begun rounding enough for me to notice every time I looked in the mirror. Other people probably wouldn't recognize it yet. But I did. Every morning before work, I wrapped an extra layer of cloth tightly around my waist to flatten the small bump beneath my uniform. It was uncomfortable. Sometimes it became difficult to breathe. But I couldn't risk anyone noticing. Especially not Dominic. Still, I knew I was only delaying the inevitable. Another month or 2, and no amount of cloth would hide 3 growing pups. Sooner or later, I would have to disappear. After carefully counting the weeks, I made a plan. Once I reached 20 weeks, I would request a long leave. It would be late enough that no one questioned it. And early enough to keep my pregnancy hidden. The only problem was explaining it to Dominic. The man questioned everything. Nothing escaped those sharp eyes. For days, I tried to come up with a believable excuse. A family emergency. A medical issue. Burnout. None of them sounded convincing enough. Before I could settle on one, Dominic made a decision of his own. Just a few weeks before I entered my 4th month, he announced he would be moving to Blackwood Estate for a period of time. Blackwood Estate wasn't simply another residence. It was the Blackwood family's most private sanctuary. Hidden deep within acres of forests and mountains, far from the city, it was protected by nearly 200 elite guards 24 hours a day. The estate had belonged to Dominic's mother. After she passed away, it became his. As his personal bodyguard, I had accompanied him there several times over the years. It was peaceful, quiet, beautiful. Honestly, it was my favorite place to work. But this time, the announcement made my heart sink. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse. Living under the same roof as Dominic while secretly carrying his triplets sounded like the worst possible idea. One careless moment, one suspicious glance, one mistake, and everything would fall apart. I even considered making an excuse to stay behind. But refusing an assignment like this would only raise questions. Questions Dominic Blackwood would never stop asking until he found the truth. So I buried my fear behind the same calm expression I always wore. And accepted the assignment. And silently prayed that Blackwood Estate wouldn't become the place where my biggest secret was finally exposed. The morning we were scheduled to leave for Blackwood Estate, I woke before sunrise. For a long moment, I simply stood beside my bedroom window, watching the first rays of sunlight spread across the city. Then, without thinking, both of my hands rested over my stomach. A small smile found its way onto my face. Moon Goddess. I whispered quietly. I don't know what you've planned for us. But please, keep my babies safe. I can endure anything. Just don't let anything happen to them. I gently rubbed my stomach before chuckling to myself. And you three? You've already made Daddy's life difficult enough. So while we're at Blackwood Estate, please don't grow too quickly. Don't make your bellies, my belly, any bigger. And please, no trouble. Just for a few weeks. I shook my head with a helpless laugh. I can't believe I'm negotiating with babies who aren't even born yet. As always, Dominic traveled with an entire entourage. The private jet was already waiting for us. Besides Dominic and me, there were 2 additional members from the elite security unit. His personal chef. His private fitness trainer. For household staff members who had worked for the Blackwood family for years. His personal physician. And one unfamiliar woman. She looked to be in her late 40s. Elegant. Calm. Confident. I assumed Dominic had hired another specialist. It wasn't unusual. Every trip over the past 3 years had looked almost identical. Dominic hated taking risks. Even though Blackwood Estate already had its own staff, medical team, security department, and maintenance crew, he still preferred bringing his personal people with him. The only new face this time was the woman. I didn't think much about it. A few hours later, our plane landed on the estate's private runway. The fresh air immediately washed away the smell of the city. Towering trees surrounded the property in every direction, and the mountains stretched endlessly beyond them. It had always been my favorite place. The mansion itself was nearly impossible to reach without permission. Around 200 armed guards protected the estate day and night. If there was one place in the country where Dominic Blackwood was untouchable, it was here. Several electric carts waited to drive us from the runway to the mansion. I climbed into the same cart as Dominic. As we drove through the long tree-lined road, my eyes wandered toward the cart behind us. The unfamiliar woman was sitting there. I frowned slightly. Before I could ask who she was, Dominic suddenly spoke. You see what you've done to me? I turned to him in confusion. Sir? My heartbeat instantly sped up. Had he figured everything out? He sighed dramatically before leaning back in his seat. I have to attend therapy now. All because you still haven't found one person. I blinked. That was what he meant? I silently released the breath trapped inside my chest. For one terrifying second, I thought he had discovered my secret. Instead, he was still complaining about the mysterious man. Even after months. He simply refused to let it go. Life at Blackwood Estate settled into its usual routine. The peaceful surroundings made it easier to forget the outside world. Unfortunately, my pregnancy refused to be forgotten. Every morning, I wrapped another layer of cloth around my stomach. Then another. Until breathing itself became uncomfortable. The babies were growing quickly. Triplets always did. I knew tightening the cloth this much wasn't a good idea. But I convinced myself it was only temporary. Just until we returned to the city. One afternoon, while standing outside Dominic's study, my vision suddenly blurred. I frowned. The cloth around my waist suddenly felt impossibly tight. I tried taking a slow breath. Nothing. Another. Still nothing. The hallway tilted beneath my feet. 1 second. I was standing. The next. My knees gave out. Strong arms caught me before I hit the marble floor. Elias. Several guards rushed toward me. Someone called for the estate doctor. Another sprinted toward Dominic's office. I'm fine. I mumbled weakly. It was just dizziness. Please. Let me go. Nobody listened. Within minutes, I was being carried toward the estate's medical clinic. Panic spread through every part of my body. No. Please. Not here. If anyone examined me, everything would be over. I tried sitting up. I'm all right. I just need fresh air. Please. No one even slowed down. The clinic doors opened. I was placed onto an examination bed before I could protest again. My heart was pounding so loudly that I could barely hear anything else. The door suddenly opened once more. Dominic walked in. His usual calm expression was gone. For the first time in years, he actually looked worried. He walked straight toward me. Elias. Are you all right? I opened my mouth. I wanted to tell him not to let anyone touch me. I wanted to beg him to send everyone away. Before I could speak, the unfamiliar woman entered the room carrying a medical case. She walked directly toward me. Confused, I immediately stopped her. I'm fine. You don't need to examine me. My mind is perfectly healthy. For a second, both she and Dominic stared at me. Then they smiled. The woman couldn't help but laugh softly. She gently took my wrist to check my pulse before moving closer. Then, her hand slowly reached toward my stomach. My entire body stiffened. No. I quickly grabbed her wrist. Please don't. She calmly removed my hand. I desperately looked toward Dominic. He stepped closer and spoke gently. Elias. She isn't my therapist. I frowned. She's one of the most respected maternity specialists in the country. Everything inside me shattered. The room spun. My mouth went dry. Why? I could barely force the words out. Why did you bring her here? Dominic slowly closed the distance between us. His eyes never left mine. To take care of you? His large hand gently rested against my stomach. And to take care of our triplets growing inside your belly. I froze. Completely. His thumb slowly rubbed over the small bump hidden beneath my clothes. Then he lowered himself slightly and pressed a gentle kiss against my stomach. A smile appeared on his face. I've waited far too long to do that. My mind went blank. Then anger exploded through every part of me. You? My voice trembled. You knew? Dominic remained silent. Instead, he asked the doctor to give us a few minutes alone. As soon as she left, he looked back at me. I did. His voice was calm. I knew from the day you discovered your pregnancy. You honestly believed someone like you could hide something this important from someone like me? Something inside me finally broke. I slapped his hand away from my stomach. Hard. You knew? I whispered. Then my voice rose. You knew. I forced myself off the examination bed. My breathing became uneven. I hate you. I hate you for this. You knew everything. And you still kept pretending. You played with me. You played with my feelings. And then you brought me here. So I couldn't run away. So you could take my babies from me. You made me completely helpless, Dominic. Dominic stood frozen. Shock filled his face. Elias. He carefully took one step toward me. Listen to me. No. I backed away, tears spilling uncontrollably down my face. I already accepted it. I knew you would take them after they were born. I accepted that. But I wanted these months. Just these few months. I wanted to love them without waking up every day terrified you'd discover us. I wanted to feel like they were still mine. My babies, my family, and even that. You took away from me. The room fell silent. Only my sobs echoed through the clinic. Dominic reached toward me once again. Elias. But I stepped back before he could touch me. Without another word, I turned around, walked out of the clinic, and left Dominic Blackwood standing there in complete silence, watching the person he loved walk away in tears. That day, I didn't leave my room again. The moment I reached it, I locked the door and leaned against it, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. Everything felt unreal. For months, I had lived in constant fear of this moment. And now that it had finally happened, I felt empty. A knock came not long afterward. Elias. It was one of the house staff. Chef prepared dinner. I'll leave it outside. No reply. An hour later, another knock. Mr. Elias, please eat something. Still nothing. By evening, I had refused breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I knew I wasn't just starving myself anymore. I was starving my babies too. But I couldn't force myself to eat. Every time I looked at food, I remembered Dominic's words. To take care of you, and our triplets. Every bite felt like accepting that everything was over. I wrapped my arms around my stomach and whispered, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm just not strong enough today. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of a key turning inside the lock. My heart immediately sank. Only one person had another key. The door slowly opened. Dominic walked inside carrying a tray himself. He closed the door quietly before placing the tray on the coffee table. Fresh soup. warm bread, fruit. Everything had been prepared exactly the way I usually liked it. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You haven't eaten since morning." I didn't answer. He slowly walked closer. "I'm not here to take our babies away from you, Elias." I laughed bitterly. "Then why are you here?" "Because you're carrying my children." I immediately looked up. His expression softened. "And because you're carrying our children. I want them to be safe. I want you to be safe. I want to take care of all 4 of you." I shook my head. "I don't want that." His brows furrowed. "I don't need your care. I only wanted these few months." My voice became quieter with every word. "I already accepted everything. I accepted that once they were born, they would belong with you. I never planned on running away. I never planned on keeping them from you. My throat tightened. I just wanted these 9 months. I wanted to wake up every morning knowing they were still with me. I wanted to talk to them. Feel them grow. Love them. Before I had to let them go. When they were born, I would have handed them to you myself. I would have never stopped you. So why?" My eyes filled again. "Why couldn't you just let me have that?" Dominic took another step. "Elias." No. I stood up before he could finish. "I don't want explanations. I don't want promises. I don't want your sympathy." My shaking hands grabbed the tray from the table. Dominic's eyes widened. "Elias, don't." The tray slipped from my hands. It crashed against the wall, ceramic shattering across the floor. The room fell into complete silence. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. Then, "Enough." Dominic's voice exploded through the room. "Elias, will you stop for 1 second? And listen to me?" The shout echoed through every corner of the room. I froze. Completely. It felt as if someone had pressed pause on my entire body. I simply stood there, staring at him. Unable to move. Unable to think. For 3 years, Dominic Blackwood had never once raised his voice at me. Not once. I had watched him scold executives until they lowered their heads. I had seen experienced security officers leave his office looking terrified after making the smallest mistake. But me, no matter what happened, he had always spoken to me patiently. Calmly. Sometimes, he was even kinder to me than everyone else. That was why. Hearing him shout at me felt unreal. My mind went completely blank. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even blink. I just stood there, silently staring at him. The color slowly drained from my face. The fear in my eyes was impossible to hide. It was as if every emotion inside me had simply shut down. Dominic's anger disappeared the instant he saw my expression. "Elias." His voice immediately softened. No response. He carefully walked toward me. "Elias." Still nothing. I didn't even look at him. I just kept staring at the broken pieces of the plate scattered across the floor. My body was there. But my mind wasn't. A strange emptiness settled inside my chest. Dominic stopped in front of me. Slowly, very carefully, he reached out and cupped my face. "Elias. I'm sorry." No answer. I shouldn't have shouted. Nothing. Not even a nod. Not even a glance. The complete silence frightened Dominic far more than tears ever could. He gently pulled me into his arms. I didn't hug him back. I didn't push him away either. I simply stood there, motionless, like a doll that had forgotten how to move. His arms tightened around me. "I'm sorry. I'll never take our babies away from you. I swear. I only wanted to keep you safe. I only wanted to protect you and our triplets." Still, nothing. Dominic slowly rested one hand over my stomach. "I want to love them. And I want to love you. I never planned on separating any of you." When I finally spoke, my voice was barely a whisper. "Then why?" Dominic looked down at me. "Why didn't you tell me before? Why did you pretend you didn't know? And," my lips trembled slightly, "why were you so cruel to me?" Dominic closed his eyes for a brief moment. "I was waiting. I hoped you'd trust me enough to tell me yourself. And I wasn't trying to be cruel." A small, guilty smile appeared. "I liked teasing you. You'd get so annoyed. I loved seeing your reactions." His smile slowly disappeared. "But I never realized how frightened you really were." I quietly turned away from him. Without another word, I walked to the bed and lay down with my back facing him. I didn't ask him to leave. I simply didn't have the strength to say anything anymore. A few moments later, I felt the mattress dip behind me. Dominic lay beside me carefully. He didn't force me to face him. He didn't ask me to forgive him. His fingers gently brushed through my hair while his other hand rested protectively over my stomach. I remained completely silent. No tears. No anger. No words. That silence frightened Dominic more than any scream ever could. Because he knew. The first time in 3 years that he had raised his voice at me. He hadn't just hurt my feelings. He had broken something inside me. From the very next morning, I started eating properly again. Not because I had forgiven Dominic. Not because I was happy. But because every meal I skipped wasn't just hurting me anymore. 3 little lives were growing inside me. They needed me. Even if my heart was still broken. I barely spoke after that. Not to the house staff. Not to the guards. Not even to the doctor during my checkups unless it was absolutely necessary. The lively bodyguard everyone knew slowly disappeared. Dominic, however, refused to accept my silence. Every morning, he would personally bring me breakfast before leaving for work. At lunch, he somehow always found time to eat beside me. At dinner, he would patiently make sure I finished everything on my plate. No matter how many times I ignored him. He never stopped talking. Some days he told me about work. Some days he complained about his managers. Other days he simply talked to the babies. I know you're kicking your father again. I'll remember this when you 3 are older. I would pretend not to listen. But secretly, I listened to every word. As my pregnancy progressed, Dominic became almost obsessive about my comfort. If I looked tired, he was already placing another pillow behind my back. If I stood for too long, he would tell me to sit down. Every night before we slept, he would gently kiss my forehead before resting a soft kiss over my growing belly. It embarrassed me every single time. But somehow, it also made me feel safe. Before I realized it, I had entered my 5th month. Carrying triplets made my stomach much larger than most people expected. Every morning it seemed a little bigger than the day before. The babies had also become much more active. Sometimes all 3 kicked at once, making my entire stomach ripple beneath my clothes. Dominic found it fascinating. I found it exhausting. One morning, Dominic had to leave the estate for a business meeting. It'll only be 1 day, he told me before leaving. I'll be back before tomorrow morning. I simply nodded. After he left, the estate felt strangely empty. Without really thinking, I decided to take a walk through the forest trails surrounding the mansion. I kept walking. One path became another. Then another. By the time I realized I had wandered too far, I had no idea how to return. The search team found me shortly after sunset. When they escorted me back, Dominic was already waiting. He had returned the moment he heard I was missing. The moment our eyes met, I knew I was in trouble. His expression remained calm. But his eyes, they burned with restrained fury. Without saying a word, he led me upstairs. The bedroom door shut behind us. Click. Locked. I immediately turned around. Opened the door. No response. Take me out? My frustration finally exploded. Or I swear I'll kill you. To my surprise, even in his anger, Dominic smiled. You think you can kill me? The words hit me harder than I expected. I looked down at my stomach. 3 tiny kicks answered almost immediately. A helpless sigh escaped me. No. I couldn't. Not while these 3 little troublemakers were dancing inside me. Slowly, I lowered my head. Trying my hardest to look strong. Trying not to let him see how close I was to breaking. My alpha pride refused to let me appear weak. Dominic walked closer until he stood in front of me. I'm only doing this because I want to protect you. He sighed softly. Why won't you trust me already? Shut up. I finally looked at him. You're not protecting me. You just want to get rid of me. Just admit it. He stared at me for a long moment. If that's what you want to believe, then believe it. But it won't change the truth. He walked toward the door. Stay here. And for once, be a good boy. Before I could answer, he was gone. Nearly an hour later, the door opened again. Dominic walked inside carrying a bowl of warm soup. He placed it on the bedside table before looking at me. Finish it. I didn't move. I kept staring out the window. A few seconds passed. Then his voice became firmer. Elias. Finish your soup. Without thinking, I picked up the bowl and quietly started eating. The room remained silent until I finished every last spoonful. After placing the empty bowl aside, I lay down on the bed without looking at him. I was still angry. Still hurt. Still afraid. Dominic slowly sat beside me. He gently brushed a few strands of hair away from my forehead before pressing a soft kiss there. You really don't listen until I raise my voice. A small sigh escaped him. Do you? Then he leaned down and placed another gentle kiss against my stomach. Before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. You're going to kill me after the babies are born. Dominic froze. He slowly looked up at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he let out a quiet sigh. You really know how to ruin a peaceful moment. I didn't smile. I simply whispered. My babies will never forgive you if you do. My voice trembled. I know they won't. Dominic noticed the tears gathering in my eyes. The fear I'd carried for months was still there. Still refusing to let me breathe. Without another word, he carefully shifted closer and rested his head just below my chest, beside my growing stomach. His voice became quiet. I've heard people say pregnancy hormones can make someone believe the worst possible things. They can make every fear feel real. They can make even the strongest person doubt everything. A faint smile crossed his face. I didn't understand it before. But now, I think I'm finally seeing proof. He reached for my hand and held it gently. Then he looked up at me. Elias, I'm making you a promise. He placed one hand over my stomach. I swear in the name of our unborn babies. I will never kill you. I will never take our children away from you. And I will never allow anyone else to hurt you either. Our babies are precious to me. His fingers tightened gently around my hand. But so are you. You've always been. For me, there has never been a future where I kept the babies and lost you. I stared at him in silence. For the first time in months, the unbearable weight pressing against my heart began to lift. The fear that had followed me every single day finally loosened its grip. I closed my eyes. A quiet breath escaped my lips. For the first time since discovering I was pregnant, I truly believed everything might actually be alright. Hey everyone! This is a shortened audiobook version of the story, edited to comply with YouTube community guidelines. Dominic and Elias have a much longer, slightly different, and completely uncensored version of their story on my Patreon, featuring an unexpected twist and beautiful ending along with many scenes and details that couldn't be included here. If you'd like to listen to the full uncensored audiobook, simply scan the QR code shown on the screen or visit my Patreon using the link in my profile. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy the story. After that night, something changed between us. Not all at once. Not enough for me to forget everything that had happened. But enough for the fear inside me to stop growing. For the first time in months, I began to believe that maybe Dominic wasn't my enemy. Trust didn't come from his promises. It came from watching him every single day. He rearranged his meetings whenever I wasn't feeling well. The estate doctor somehow always arrived before I even asked for help. Meals appeared exactly when I felt hungry. The chef constantly introduced new dishes, and if I liked something once, it somehow appeared on the menu again a few days later. Nothing escaped Dominic's attention. The staff had noticed it too. Their cold, demanding CEO had become almost impossible whenever I was involved. If I looked tired, work stopped. If I looked uncomfortable, everyone around me somehow knew before I said a word. I never asked for any of it. Yet somehow, everything revolved around making sure I was comfortable. Slowly, without realizing it, I stopped waiting for the day everything would fall apart. One evening I couldn't sleep. No matter how many times I changed positions, my mind refused to settle. Dominic closed the file he had been reading. Come outside. We stepped onto the balcony overlooking the mountains. The night air was cool, and the estate below was completely quiet. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then I finally asked the question that had been bothering me. How did you know it was me? Dominic smiled faintly. I didn't know at first. But I had my suspicions. You started acting differently. You weren't yourself. I've spent years learning to notice the smallest changes in the people around me. So I had someone quietly make sure you were all right. I let out a helpless laugh. So I never fooled you. Not for long. I looked toward the stars before asking another question. Then why were you so sure I could be carrying your children? You searched everywhere for me. You sounded completely certain. Dominic was silent for a few moments. Then he answered honestly. Because you were different. I looked at him. What do you mean? The first day you joined my team, I couldn't explain it. But every instinct I had told me to keep you close. You stood out. You were someone I wanted to protect before I even understood why. He smiled to himself. And after that night? I finally understood what that feeling meant. The trust one felt with you was unlike anything I'd experienced before. I knew you weren't just anyone. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Hearing those words made something warm settle inside my chest. Then, naturally, Dominic ruined the moment. He looked at me with exaggerated concern. Although, I'm worried. I frowned. About what? Our future. What about it? He sighed dramatically. I'm starting to think our children might inherit your ability to miss the obvious. Excuse me? He laughed. Elias. I hired a new chef because your appetite completely changed. I reduced your duties. I adjusted the security schedule. I practically reorganized the estate around you. And somehow, you still didn't realize I already knew. He shook his head. I honestly don't know how I trusted my safety to you for 3 years. Oh, shut up. I muttered. His grin only grew wider. And now I'll have 3 more stubborn troublemakers to deal with. I stared at him before giving his arm a light shove. You're impossible. So I've been told. And unbelievably annoying. I've heard that too. Despite myself, I laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. But it was real. Dominic looked at me for a moment before smiling quietly. There you are. I've missed hearing that. For the first time since everything had begun, neither of us said another word. We simply sat together beneath the stars. And the silence no longer felt lonely. By the time I entered my 8th month, I had stopped counting the days. At some point, Dominic stopped feeling like the man I feared. Without even realizing it. He had become my greatest source of comfort. Whenever I woke up feeling exhausted, he was already beside me. Whenever my back hurt, he was the first to notice. Whenever I couldn't eat, he somehow convinced me to finish at least a little. I trusted him. Completely. Something I never thought I'd be able to say. Unfortunately, trust didn't make carrying triplets any easier. Every single day felt heavier than the last. My stomach had become so large that even turning over in bed felt like a challenge. Walking from the bedroom to the garden left me breathless. Sleeping comfortably had become almost impossible. The doctors did everything they could. The nurses checked on me almost every hour. The house staff never let me lift a finger. Dominic practically refused to leave my side. Even when meetings couldn't be postponed anymore, he handled them from the estate so he could return to me every few minutes. Everyone was helping me. Yet, nothing could take away the discomfort. One particular night, everything became too much. I had barely slept for days. My entire body ached. Even breathing felt exhausting. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to stay strong like I always had. After all, I was a dominant alpha. I had always believed alphas endured everything without breaking. But that night, my pride finally lost. Without saying a word, I leaned forward and buried my face against Dominic's shoulder. I can't do this anymore. My voice came out as nothing more than a whisper. I'm so tired. For several moments. He didn't say anything. He simply wrapped his arms around me and stayed there. He didn't tell me to be strong. He didn't tell me everything would be all right. He just stayed with me. Somehow, that helped more than any words ever could. When I finally pulled away, I looked up at him. Then I froze. His eyes were red. There were tears gathered in them. I stared in complete disbelief. The man everyone called heartless, the CEO who never showed weakness in front of anyone, was crying because he couldn't bear seeing me in pain. I blinked several times before letting out a small laugh. You're crying. He immediately looked away. I'm not. You are. I absolutely am not. There are literally tears in your eyes. He cleared his throat awkwardly. Those don't count. I laughed again. For the first time in weeks. A real laugh. The next morning, I didn't let him forget it. Good morning. I smiled. Did you sleep well after crying all night? Dominic looked up from his coffee. I wasn't crying. Oh? I must have imagined it then. You absolutely imagined it. For the rest of the day, we kept teasing each other. It felt normal. Like we had finally become the family we were always meant to be. A few weeks later, at exactly 37 weeks, our little troublemakers finally decided they had kept us waiting long enough. The delivery room was filled with doctors, nurses, and what felt like half of Blackwood Estate waiting outside. After what felt like the longest day of my life, the first cry echoed through the room. Then the second. Then the third. 2 healthy boys. And 1 beautiful little girl. I couldn't stop smiling. Neither could Dominic. When the nurses carefully placed them beside me, every hardship suddenly became worth it. I looked at the 3 tiny faces sleeping peacefully beside me. Then at Dominic. He wasn't looking at the babies. He was looking at me. As if he still couldn't believe we had actually made it. News spread through Blackwood Estate within minutes. The entire mansion celebrated. The staff who had taken care of me throughout the pregnancy looked happier than I'd ever seen them. Even the security team, who rarely smiled, couldn't hide their excitement. I thought life would become easier after they were born. I was wrong. It became 10 times harder. The 2 boys were little hurricanes. Our daughter wasn't any calmer. Together, the 3 of them managed to turn the entire estate upside down before they even learned to walk properly. Most nights, neither Dominic nor I got more than a few hours of sleep. One would wake up crying. Then another. Then somehow all 3. By morning, Both of us looked more exhausted than after running an entire security operation. One afternoon, Dominic looked at our 3 children running around the garden before sighing dramatically. I can negotiate billion-dollar contracts. But these 3, they scare me. I couldn't stop laughing. I told you they'd take after you. They definitely take after you. They're stubborn. They're fearless. And they never listen. Sounds exactly like their father. He pointed at me. I was talking about you. 1 week after our children's first birthday, Blackwood Estate was decorated once again. This time, not for a celebration of the triplets, but for us. Standing beneath the open sky, surrounded by our family and the people who had stood beside us through everything, Dominic took my hand. A year ago, I had been terrified he would take everything away from me. Now, he was promising to spend the rest of his life beside me. As I looked at our 3 children laughing in the front row, I realized something. The journey that had begun with fear ended with the family I never believed I deserved. And if someone asked me what my greatest achievement in life was, it wouldn't be becoming the strongest alpha, or serving the most powerful CEO. It would be this: becoming the father of 3 incredible little troublemakers, and finding a home in the man I once feared the most.